Right, today we're going to go on to lesson 5 in the study of the miraculous life of Gotama Buddha. Today we're going to look at section 2.2, the 5 investigations. So I'm going to kind of just give my views on this, why the Bodhisattva makes the 5 investigations, the significance of it, especially for the practicing Buddhists today. Now, so far we know from the story of the Buddha that he is reborn in his penultimate life into Sutta heaven, and the time comes when, as the story goes, that he's ready for rebirth on earth, and then the gods, it is said, will gather together in a multitude from the various heavens above to come down, and apparently some devas from the lower worlds can also come up to Sutta, but they can't remain there long. So it's a kind of like a big assembly of divine beings, and they're kind of sending off the Bodhisattva to be reborn on earth. Of course, here this statement alone creates a problem, because we know that, or at least we understand, according to the teachings on karma, you can't really choose your rebirth. So apparently there is an exception here, because we're talking about the Buddha. We're talking about someone who's going to end his karma, is going to end his rebirth, who has reached such a level of mental focus, mental control, that in a sense he's able to direct his mind to be reborn. Now, what's interesting is, of all the various religious figures, historical religious figures in our world, we can say that Gotama Buddha is one of those unique teachers who chooses to be born, even though he's a human being, he chooses to be born in our world, and then he also chooses to pass away at a certain time on his 80th birthday. So all this shows a kind of very special mastery of the life forces. Of course, people, it might be difficult to kind of explain this on a simple level of, say, a Sunday school, because we like to talk about karma as personal responsibility and so on. But like I said, we in this case, we're talking about the Buddha. So, according to this is the 5 investigations, Pancha Maha Vilokana, are recorded in the Jataka Nidana, the introduction to the Jataka commentary, J148F, J volume 1, page 48 and page 49. You'll see a record of the 5 investigations. The first is that of the suitable lifespan. The human lifespan should be not too long, not too short. There is one point here which we often forget. I'm not heard any teacher actually saying this. This first choice actually is a human choice, because here we're talking about the human lifespan, not too long, not too short. So we also have to explain why he chose the human world. I mean, why can't he just arise in the, say, the Sutta heaven or even Tawatingsa, and then come down to earth and preach? Well, and the first thing is that we have never had any such religious teachers who kind of appear from the heaven and come down and teach us like some, even like aliens, So that is highly unlikely. On the other hand, he chooses to be a human being, not some other being. Of course, he wouldn't choose to be lower than a human being, say a yaksha or some other, or definitely not an animal. So, obviously, we're talking about a human civilization. We're talking about someone who has attained such a high level, the highest level of human evolution, that he's ready, because of his experience and his attainment, he's able and willing to teach the rest of mankind what he has discovered. So this being born as a human is very significant. It shows that even you and I can attain that same level as the Buddha. We also can become the Buddha if you want to. Of course, this is a very big decision, and it's not something we should trivialize, something we should turn into this kind of big vow. This will happen, what has happened in later Buddhism. People say, oh, why do you want to become an arahat? It's a narrow, inferior thing. Nowhere in the sutta is this mentioned. This is later hubris, unfortunately. It's wrong view, and a very serious one. We should not entertain such wrong views. It's very costly, comically. The fact that the Buddha is a human Buddha shows we can become Buddha ourselves, but it is not an easy task. The Buddha has to go through many lives. You can say he has gone through the most number of lives of various combinations, lots of difficulties. He is born in almost all the, well, you can say even all the states, happy states and suffering states at some point of his life. But once he makes that vow to be Buddha, in the case of Gotama Buddha before Dipankara Buddha, he will never be reborn in some of those, he will never be reborn in the subhuman states or in the asanya satta, it seems, and also since it's not a non-returner, he will not be reborn in the four divine, the four pure abodes. Of course, another problem arises, what about his life in the Jataka stories? Here again, we have to ask ourselves, are we talking about this bodhisattva who took his vow, this in the time of Dipankara, and during that long period he's reborn to all those wide range of beings, from animal to human? I feel that the non-human aspect of the Jataka stories are folk tales which have been taken in later, and we can see them as representing the Bodhisattva before he took the vow, before he was officially a Bodhisattva, so to speak. Of course, we can still speak of him as a Bodhisattva. It doesn't really matter, because these are stories, these are Jataka stories to illustrate certain virtues that he has, and these Jataka stories are taken from popular stories, and they were kind of revised to present many of these Buddhist virtues. Otherwise, these stories would have been forgotten anyway, but the Buddhists preserved this amazing set of Indian folk tales. However, the Buddhists do have a very unique set of stories, especially in the last 10 Jatakas, where the Bodhisattva was born as human beings, and there you see him cultivating various the 10 perfections, or the various perfections, and those stories are really long, really beautiful. They are classics which we need to pay some attention to, and then most of us are not familiar with the stories, unfortunately. So there's another area where we're spending so much listening to talks that we have digressed, have been distracted from actually studying the suttas, even reading the Jataka stories, listening to the Jataka stories. This is one of those very sad kind of situation in Buddhism today. Every speaker comes to town, gives a talk, his idea is to raise funds. He's not really teaching the Dhamma, he's teaching his own talk, he's giving his own ideas. Basically, the bottom line is, donate to me. There is so much in the suttas, there's so much in the commentaries. You have the Jataka stories, the Dhammapada stories that we need to hear, and these people need to tell these stories to deepen and enrich our culture. So that's one aspect. Coming back to the idea of the Buddha as a human being, so we are given this opportunity. We can become Buddhas if we want to. It's not something we should trivialize. It's something which is very difficult. On the other hand, you don't need to be a Buddha to awaken. It's just like you're going to university, you have this really great professor. Well, as long as you're a graduate, you pass your exam, you can become a lecturer, you can get a good job, that's good enough, you've passed. We pass by beginning as a stream winner, and once returner, non-returner, and then Arhat. In other words, you're on the path. So the path is there once the Buddha arises. So that is the significance of the Buddha being born human. Now then, in this same category, first investigation, he selects in this world, earth, to be born at a time when the lifespan is not too long, not too short. That will be between 100,000 years, and that's quite a long time. Not more than 100,000 human years to 100 human years. And that's quite a big gap, really. So apparently, at that time, 2,500 years ago, the lifespan is just right, kind of more or less same as our lifespan now. So this lifespan of about, say, 100 years or 100 and so years, we are able to listen to the Dhamma, let it sink in, we reflect on it. If the lifespan is shorter than 100 years, there's a time when lifespan, according to the Chakravarti Sihanada Sutta, can shorten to 10 years. In other words, the human maturation, the metabolism increases rapidly, and people mature faster. By the time a maiden is 5 years old, she's able to bear babies. So you imagine that there's little time to really have mental cultivation. We become like cats and dogs, basically. On the other hand, if the lifespan is too long, more than 100,000 years, like the gods, we tend to enjoy life, and we say, oh, there's no such thing as impermanence. So we won't be really wanting to listen to such teachings. So this is quite logical, and this is the first choice. Now the second choice is the place, the continent, the ideal environment on earth. Here, we should not think too big of the idea of continent here. It's not like the whole of Asia. Here, the Pali word is Deepa. It means an island. A kind of, you can even say in this case, society, if you like, the second investigation. So here is a continent of Jambu Deepa. You have the ancient cosmology, the northern Kurus, and then you have the on the west you have Aparaguyana, and then this on the east, on the south you have all these various continents, and India is the subcontinent is there in the middle. Now what's interesting is India is called a dwipa, a continent, an island by itself. But we know today India is not an island, it's a subcontinent, it's connected to the Asian Massif. But if you look at some ancient maps of the world, paleological maps, you actually see India as this triangle piece of land is deep down in the south, more or less where South Africa, the southern tip of South Africa is. And slowly this triangular land called India, we call India today, migrated kind of like in a curved way, and it moves about a millimeter a year, more or less, and finally it hits the Asian Massif. Today is still pushing against the Himalayas. In fact, the Himalayas is rising up because of this pushing of India. So it was an island, right? So this is one of those interesting mysteries which we can only think about. So probably Buddhas of the past lived at a time when India was still literally an island. So this is this continent, this island, which the Buddhas chose because the people there are intelligent and ready for the dhamma. So basically, it's you can say it's the most civilized place where people are ready to listen to these deep teachings and be able to understand. And then the next choice is the country, the padesa, the country. So here, in other words, we are making it more narrow now. Which area of this continent? So you have India, you have this really big place. In the south, you have lots of mountains and tribal groups. Then there is this special area in the northern Gangetic plain, very fertile, and then it's a time when iron has been discovered, so it's the Iron Age. So it's a time when the kings were very powerful. They've conquered large areas of land, and there is this peace and prosperity, and people are becoming very civilized. They have a specialization of labor, they have money, economy, they have peace basically. And when people have a lot of peace, they have a lot of time, they start thinking, they start worrying, and that's when religion comes in. So of course they are prosperous too, they have surplus income and so on, things like that. Which is very important for religion. Without money, there's no religion. We always forget this. We think that money is nothing but about heaven or goodness. Religion is about money in many ways. Awakening is not about money. Buddha Dhamma, renunciation is not about money. So here is where the Buddha comes into this kind of society which is very rich and very successful, progressive, being burdened by progress and success, as in our urban societies today. So basically the Buddha is born into this kind of society, and he looks at this world and says, wow, this is a very unpleasant place. And if you really think about it, you won't be happy here. So this is represented by his sight of an old man, sick man, and dead man. This tree, it represents the 3 Ds: decay, disease, death. We all are subject to this. So what's the point of us enjoying all these things? So he's kind of person who looks very well ahead. And then he sees the 4th sign. Right? So the first 3 signs represent samvega, this idea of urgency. It's like the carpet has been pulled from under you suddenly, and then you lose sense of things. You say, what's the meaning of life now? And then the 4th sign, he sees this holy man, renunciant, very happy, all by himself with almost nothing except what he's wearing, what he's holding in his hand, the alms bowl. So he feels happy, this pasada, this joy, faith in this holy man arises in him, and he kind of knows that is the way. So this is of course when he's already born in this world. So he's going to be reborn in this society where things are such that they need a teacher to give an alternative to the kind of life they are caught up with. A money society. So the Buddha provides a money-free society. I wouldn't say moneyless society, because even moneyless means you can still use money in other forms. So here, what the Buddha is introducing into this society is that you don't need money at all. Now this is the Sangha. Of course, today things have gone a little haywire. You find many monks actually have a lot of money. They work and so on. So they're not following this the Buddha's ideal anymore. So they're outsiders, basically. Technically, they're all outsiders. Whereas those monks who really follow the Buddha's ideal and vision and teaching, they would have nothing to do with money. They're truly renunciants. They're meditating, and they're very happy that way. And they are the ones who would reach the goal. So this is the reason why the Buddha chose Middle India, if you like, the Holy Land, the Madhyama Padesa. Okay. Then, so things get narrower now. The choice number 4, the Buddha now selects the family. You got to have a family to be born into. So here we have kind of a social situation. The middle Gangetic plain, that part of India, you have the 4 castes of the Brahmins, the Kshatriyas, the Vaishyas, and the Shudras, and of course the 5th outcast. The Brahmins were the priests, and they had been powerful for centuries, and they've been creating all these stories to consolidate their position, their power, and they have been really messing up religion. They have used stories and all kinds of memes, all kinds of ways to promote themselves. And of course, most of the masses, the crowd, don't see this. They just follow. In some ways, they're quite happy just to follow, not to think too much about it. But there are thinkers now. In this kind of society, you have people begin to think, begin to question, and begin to reject such overhand kind of teachings. Even among the Brahmins, there are those who reject this dishonest system of religious piety. So you have this another group, the Shramanas, those who feel that they can work for themselves to find the truth. Whereas the Brahmin says, well, I'm the way, I'm the truth, you must come through me, there's no other way. And it sounds very familiar. So the Brahmins want to promote that they are the only ones who can provide the answer. Whereas the Shramanas, the recluses, they say, no, if you practice yourself, you become morally accountable yourself, you have to do it yourself to be free from suffering. You are responsible for yourself, for your own action, for your own salvation. So we're beginning to have this kind of new vision, this choice you have. Of course, there's a problem here. Not many people want that kind of choice. They're quite happy to be told what to do. You just pay for it and so on. So this is a kind of religious laziness, if you like, a kind of animal life. And the Brahmins just love this because they're very easy to control, easy to hurt. So you find this kind of religion, the God religions, they often use this herd language and analogies and similes. You have this field to harvest, this herd of sheep with their shepherd, and fishes of men, and so on. So you see, it's a kind of very dehumanizing kind of image here. Whereas in the case of the Buddha, it says, the Buddha is saying, find your true self, be free of that self, and then you are liberated. So the 4th choice is this family, and it is a Kshatriya family. a family of nobles, of warriors. The Kshatriyas were very powerful at that time. The Brahmins were kind of pushed to the west. So you have this Kshatriyas. So I suppose one important reason why the Buddha or the Bodhisattva chooses to be born in the Kshatriya family is that it is kind of more free than the Brahmins. And moreover, that they are in power in that area, the middle country. So it's natural that he would choose such a family, and he would choose a noble family rather than, say, a poor family, which would be very difficult to start with. I mean, we see today Buddhism has reached a stage in the urban areas where you won't be a good Buddhist, or you won't be even a Buddhist at all if you're not rich, if you don't have money, if you don't have something, you can't be a Buddhist. You have nothing to give. And sadly, the Buddhists of the urban areas now, they're very conscious of their class, or maybe they're not conscious of it, but they follow this idea of class, of looking at others, say, okay, you're different from us, and so on. They may not say it, but they show this. So there's a very sad kind of development. Again, here, these are the way of the outsiders. So here, the Bodhisattva chooses to be born as a Kshatriya so that he's able to include more people later on when he becomes Buddha, and he does just that. When he becomes Buddha, he allows anyone to renounce the world, to become monks and nuns. He doesn't say, what race are you, what clan are you. One of the questions that's asked is only, are you a human? I mean, it's only if you're a human you can become a monk or a nun. So he joins the warrior class, and he goes through this life of pleasure, of power, of promise. And this is very important too, because the idea today, again, we see is kind of the other way around. People tend to become monks when they are poor, or when they have a problem, or they think, oh, when I become a monk, I can solve my problems. In a sense, that is right, that is good, if you meet good teachers and you keep to the rules. But if you don't, then you're going to get all those things that you ever wanted, or you couldn't get as a layman, but then you destroy the whole life of renunciation. And the karmic consequences are terrible. You'll be reborn as a subhuman world, in animals, or in the hell, as a hell being. So here, by becoming a monk, you are able to renounce the world. You're able to walk this straight path with as little burden as possible, and quickly reach the goal, nirvana. Right, so then finally the Buddha chooses the mother. This is quite a tricky one, number 5. Of course, he's going to be born as a human, so he needs a human mother. Of course, that's no problem in itself, but the problem is the kind of mother he's going to choose. He's going to choose someone who is going to pass away a week after he's born. Now, of course, this is quite tricky. We can see this as a prophecy, or we can see that actually the fact that a mother passed away when 1 week after the child is born came first, and then came the stories. We really don't know. But whatever it is, this idea of after the fact kind of way of telling stories began to build up over the centuries, and you get this fantastic story of the Buddha as we know it today, which we have to deal with. So, but these are very instructive stories. So there is a use, there's a purpose there. The Buddha's mother passes away 1 week after he is born. We can simply say it just happened. That's it. There's nothing much for us to tell about. Well, of course, people might not be happy with that. But let's look at how he was born. According to the story, the mother has carried a child for nearly 10 months, and she wants to go back to the parents' house. And this is what they normally do in India those days. When they're going to deliver, they want to go back to their parents' house. They normally deliver there, where their parents are there taking care of them. And but what's interesting here is that the Buddha was born in neither house. The Buddha was born somewhere in between, in Lumbini Garden, between Kapilavatthu and Devadaha, the two clans. So he's born in this beautiful garden. We don't have to think of miracles to see the garden. It's beautiful because it was in May, in spring, so all these trees were blossoming and beautiful. The garden was beautiful. What's amazing is how the mother gave birth. The story goes that she stretched her hand to hold a branch of the sal tree, and then the child came forth from the right side. Now here again we have this amazing story that she actually has been keeping her precepts all this while. So we have this story of it as if it was like some kind of virgin birth, as it were. But it's not really so. It's just the way the story is told, right? The mother kept her precepts during the time when she was going to conceive the child, according to the story, how the story goes. That's the difficulty, because in order to conceive a child, you have to have sexual union. So is this a pious tradition? Is this also a story? We don't really know. Okay. The important thing is this mother is with child. Something must have happened. And then she decides to travel, and then she gives birth in Lumbini Garden. The child comes out from the right side. That's all the story tells us. I have doctor friends who are familiar with this story. They say, this could suggest some kind of caesarean section, that the mother gave birth, had a difficult birth, and then there were surgeons, and after all she's royalty, who had to cut her open and save the child. And this doctor further said, and that's why the mother died 7 days later. So it kind of fits in very nicely. Now we don't really know, but this is interesting theory. So then later on there are other traditions saying try to explain why the mother passed away in 7 days. For example, the mother should not bear any more child, because imagine if the Buddha has a brother, what it would mean. It would be complicated things. Imagine someone, we say this is the Buddha's brother, so you might have a kind of an hierarchy after that. When the Buddha passes away, you have this brother taking over the role, very much like the Sinhalese Nayakas of Sri Lanka, who own their temples. It becomes like a family temple, and then when the abbot dies, his nephew takes over, and this also happens in Malaysia and elsewhere. So it's very un-Buddhist kind of arrangement. So we have here the human Buddha being born from a human mother. The mother passes away 7 days later. So let's just take the story as it is, that she died, right? But having a brother, of course, is tricky, as we mentioned, and you can see this problem reflected when the foster mother asked to be ordained. the Buddha was very reluctant, and for good reason. Many people don't see this aspect why the Buddha was reluctant. Imagine your own mother. You are the Buddha and your own mother wants to become a nun. And here someone's going to say, this is the Buddha's mother. That's going to create problems again. It's like the Queen. Imagine the Queen of England becoming a nun. And that's going to create waves. So the Buddha had to introduce certain rulings. He introduced the 8 heavy rules or rules of respect to make sure that this newly ordained nun, Mahapajapati, knows her position and that she won't make waves, there won't be problems in the Sangha because of nepotism, because of the Buddha's mother is being ordained. So here again we see this kind of problem. To prevent the encroachment of the biological family into the spiritual family. The Sangha, the Buddha's Sangha, is a spiritual family. It's not a biological family. So this is where renunciation means you leave the biological family for a bigger family, a more global family. Alright, so although the Buddha chooses a human mother, later on he will introduce a new kind of birth where anyone who joins this new spiritual family becomes a member of a global family. So here I'll stop for today, and in lesson 6 we continue examining some aspects of this interesting discussion we have just had. So we will close for today. Let us now close with a short reflection. We have reflected on the 5 investigations. This reminds us of asking ourselves some basic questions: why we are Buddhists, or why we want to practice Buddhism, to remind ourselves of the true purpose, meaning and purpose of being a Buddhist. And to know the life of the Buddha gives us insight into this kind of understanding, so that we will reach the path in this life itself, just as the Buddha did, to be awakened as the Buddha has awakened. Reflecting in this way is wonderful good karma. By the power of such good deeds, may we be well and happy to be able to practice the Dhamma, to reach the path in this life itself, namely to be blessed with wisdom, the wisdom and courage to aspire to at least stream winning in this life itself. May our families and loved ones and friends be well and happy by the power of the 3 jewels. May all those who are practicing the Dhamma the right way too see the truth in this life itself. And by the power of the 3 jewels too, may those who have taken the wrong way, who are teaching the wrong things, may they too see the true teaching in this life itself. May all beings be well and happy. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.